Deepfakes versus misinformation plus AI or misinformation powered by AI can upend families, can upend communities, it can create discord, it can create mistrust at levels and scales that are very, very frightening and scary. Regardless of where you come from, where your platform is domiciled, whether you're foreign, whether you're Indian, whether you're owned by a rocket man or whether you're owned by somebody in Hawaii, it doesn't matter. The laws of the land must be followed because the laws have been framed to protect our citizens. This generation of Gen Zs will have to discover from their own mistakes what the perils of tech are. I mean, it's very difficult to evangelize or to advocate safety and trust to a generation of youngsters who are born into technology. My kids don't listen to me, so I don't bother telling them anything. The moment you go outside and dilute that concept of friends and family and start making it anybody who is interested in you putting a video about your food or your whatever, then you are putting yourself at risk. If you're in a public square and you're displaying all the photographs and videos that you have without at least making them private, and then you go into this problem of becoming a victim of deepfakes, then while you can blame the platform and you should blame the platform who hosts the deepfake, but you have your own personal behavior also a little bit to blame for it. It is not the government's job, nor is it the consumer's job. It is the platform's obligation to ensure that the content on their platform is something that is authentic. You certainly can't accuse me of being fit because I travel so much that I eat on the road.
If there's one person in the country whose job really has got young India wondering what's going to happen next, this office and the work they do has a direct impact on so many of our lives, be it entrepreneurship and startup, or be it social media and AI, or be it just about what's going to be the affordability and availability of new age tech. The work this office is doing is going to define in a way the mood of young India. Young India, mind you, the one which as a cohort will have a huge bearing on 2024 as well. So I'm very delighted to be having this conversation, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, sir.
What a time to be a minister and what a ministry to have. How are you feeling? Is it like no time for anything else or how's it going?
I consider it a fairly significant honor and privilege, not just to be a minister, but to be actually, in a sense, involved with and be a spectator almost to what is going on around us in this country. I mean, this is a country that just up till 8-9 years ago was a net importer of technology. We were we were the biggest consumers, and here we are with reasonable, justifiable aspirations to architecting the next decade of technology. So that is really the unleashed power in this country that certainly I am deeply honored and privileged to be even a small part of.
You say a small part, but every decision you take, like I said in my opening, has a direct bearing on young people. There is so much to talk about, but let me start by talking about the word of the season, as it were. It's deepfake, right? Everybody has an opinion on it. Everybody loves to hate it. Everybody cannot resist it still. If you were to, I'll get to the regulation in a bit. If you were to define deepfake really for middle India right now, right? How would you say that?
So misinformation, which we certainly believed was one of the many harms that social media represented before AI came onto the scene. We were very worried about weaponizing lies, weaponizing fake information. All of that has taken on a new avatar, which is deepfake. And it is playing to almost a trend of the Gen Z and the youngsters, which is consumption of video. Now you marry the propensity to weaponize the bad by using misinformation and marry that with videos and deepfakes, and you suddenly have something that is a real threat to the Gen Zs of our times and Gen Zs around the world, which is that they will now have to really worry about what they're consuming. Is it true? Is it a deep fake? Is it somebody pretending and feeding us something that we should not be believing? So it really, in a sense, takes the problem of misinformation And the harm of misinformation to a degree and a level that nobody perhaps knew was coming. We certainly anticipated it 2 years ago. The Honorable Prime Minister flagged it 2 years ago. So we knew this was coming. But the velocity certainly and the quality of what is out there and the tools that are now available to create these deepfakes are certainly something that leaves everybody concerned and worried and should.
Yeah, you're right about this being there for a while. In fact, the first instance of deepfake, if we can call it that, was perhaps Fast and Furious, if you've seen that.
Yes,
you had Paul Walker, who had tragically died, but he reappeared on screen. So it started from there. But look the journey, I mean, just look at it, the journey that deepfake has had so far. From Prime Minister Modi to President Zelensky, to the Queen, Elizabeth, to the Pope. There doesn't seem to be one person who's managed to escape it. However, a lot of people at this point feel that this is just something that impacts the celebrities or the known world. Could you lay or shed some light into how the deeper menace actually lies on crime against women, on how it can be abused?
No, it is not at all something which is very isolated. It is not on the fringe.
To the popular.
It is certainly not an outlier phenomenon. It is a very deeply divisive, deeply disruptive phenomenon. Misinformation always was. Deepfakes versus misinformation plus AI or misinformation powered by AI can upend families, can upend communities, it can create discord, it can create mistrust at levels and scales that are very, very frightening and scary. I mean, it is so easy today to create an authentic deepfake and to create divisions between two groups of people on the ground of religion or on the ground of something else. It can. I have seen loan apps, for example, using deepfakes to threaten women to paying back their loans. I have seen it in one of the ways that I was alerted to this problem of loan apps was a young cabin crew girl in a flight that I was going to Northeast who showed me a video of how her sister was being hounded by a collector by morphing videos into a pornographic image and sending that video to everybody on a phone book. So there are many things that are deeply dangerous. It is the impact, the divisiveness, it's the the power of the narrative that the video represents as well. Don't forget the virality of something like that. So I always say information spreads fast thanks to the internet, but misinformation and deepfakes spread very, very fast.
Very fast. And what you're saying is clearly suggested by data as well.
Certainly something that is, I mean, governments are of course worried about it, but what is very important and why I have these conversations, it is important for the users to start also having a much more important and much more loud expectation from these platforms. That look, I don't want to be on a platform where I'm not sure what I'm consuming. If there's a video of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, or there's a video of Rajiv Chandrasekhar, or a video of Rashmika Mandana, I should know that that video is authentic. I certainly don't want to be in a situation where I am having to think 10 times about what I'm consuming as being real or something that cannot be trusted. So our entire approach is to make these platforms wake up, and we have done this from October 2022, wake up to the duty that we have to the citizens to ensure that their platforms are safe and trusted vis-a-vis the content on their platforms. And to make it clear to them that they have an obligation. It is not the government's job, nor is it the consumer's job. It is the platform's obligation to ensure that the content on their platform is something that is authentic. And it could be authentic wrong, it can be authentic right. But if it is wrong, it is clearly seen as authentic wrong. And wrong cannot pretend to be right, and right cannot pretend to be or be framed as wrong.
It's interesting that you're saying that a lot of this will depend on how platforms react to it. You did have a meeting with them, and there are several rounds, I suppose, that are in the works as well. In that meeting, what was the general mood like? Did they, I know you've given them a deadline of sorts to come up with a plan, but are you sensing a bit of, because you've also have had a bit of a love-hate relationship?
No, I don't have, I have no love or no hate relationship with anybody. We consider it our duty to make it very clear what the law is, and we make it our duty to enforce the law. That is what governments are supposed to do. And certainly this is not done with any adversarial thought in our mind, but we certainly have an expectation that regardless of where you come from, where your platform is domiciled, whether you're foreign, whether you're Indian, whether you're owned by a rocket man or whether you're owned by somebody in Hawaii, it doesn't matter. The laws of the land must be followed because the laws have been framed to protect our citizens, to allow our citizens access to platforms in a manner that is useful for them. So we are very clear about where we stand.
What did they say?
And so I pointed out to them that way back in October of 2022 we flagged this problem to them. We developed the rules in consultation with them, and a specific rule has been inserted in the law 31B5 that talks about how patently false information, misinformation is a no-go area for all platforms, and platforms have to curate and moderate their platforms to ensure this content is not permissible. And they have either done very little about it, or if they have done something about it, they have not done enough about it.
Okay.
So I made it clear to them that we expect, without any ambiguity, not to be drawn into a fake kicking the can down the road conversation about new regulations, which is what platforms love to have. They love to talk about the future of tech. They love to talk about the future of regulations, but they do not want to talk about today's regulation, today's law, and compliance with today's law. So that is my job, to remind them that there is a law, there is a rules. And while we can have all of the conversations we want about the future regulations, and yes, we must have it. We believe some new laws are required, new regulations are required, but we certainly insist that they comply.
You've talked about a deep fake officer of sorts. Now, many are interested on, is this a human? Is this tech? Are you using AI against AI? Are you using Web3?
Yeah,
how are you
it's
doing
not a deep fake officer as much as, like I said, in our law, there are 12 types of harms or 12 types of content that a platform cannot allow on their platform. And if they do allow it, when that content is reported to them, they have to take it down or label it.
Help me understand this. Say, I just want to make it easier for people.
Sure.
I have, say, a deep fake video appears of me where it's being misused in whatever form. And I figure out that the platform is not doing much. What do? Do I call this officer? Do I report? Like, what's the medium?
If the earlier point I mentioned is how do we report the harm?
Yeah.
So we'll create a digital platform. We are also asking them, and in the 30th meeting that I'm having, as the second meeting, we will insist that there should be an in-app reporting mechanism.
Okay.
That means if you see something that you believe is violated with the law, you should be able to click.
Which generally is, like on Instagram, YouTube, you have that mechanism. One is not sure how.
No, it will be not basically saying objectionable. It will be harm. And then there will be a drop down in which you'll have to tick it is which one of the 12.
Correct.
So let us say you find a deepfake of yourself. Let's go through that example. So you click on it and it should pop down and you should say it is deepfake.
Correct.
Okay, misinformation/deepfake. That is reported to them. And if they don't do anything,
then what?
Then automatically in 36 hours that complaint is routed to the ministry, and a Rule 7 officer will then notify the platform that against that particular violation of law you have not acted, and therefore you can then approach a court of law for which we will help. Again, there will be an automated mechanism.
So it's automated.
It'll
automatically.
No, there will be no manual intervention at all.
There will be no manual.
No, absolutely
so
not.
If I have reported and the platform has not taken action, I can be assured
Yes.
that it's reaching the government.
Correct.
We've spoken about the responsibility of the platform.
Right.
I also want to talk about the free availability of this tech. While I was researching for this interview, I just Googled how to create deepfake, and there were articles on top 10 apps. They're all free.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can do it with just 2-3 hours put into it in a matter of a few minutes. So isn't that an area that needs focus as well?
This is a very fundamental question in tech. Do you regulate tech for the use cases of tech, or I mean, there are many platforms that are ostensibly developed for, let's say, video editing. And in digital video editing, you can create deepfakes as a consequence. Now, Adobe, for example, powerful big company. Shantanu, who's a CEO of Adobe, is a great company. Now, most deepfake creators will use Adobe. So, do you regulate Adobe and say, you can't do it? We are entering into an area of where tech which has never been regulated ever. Now we are finding that since tech is being used to cause harm and to aid criminal conduct, and this is not just for India, this is now all over the world, this question about where do you regulate this? Do you regulate it at the platform level, the solution, the actual software that creates the platform? At what stage do you create these regulations? And it is that famous question, famous regulatory conundrum of when you regulate a car, you don't regulate the seat belt separately and the airbag separately, you regulate the safety of the car. So is it the platform that eventually somebody is posting content on that gets regulated, which we are planning to do and we will do? But do you also do downstream regulation or guardrails or standards on platforms that enable creating of content? It is a question.
The very genesis of it.
So that question currently has no real answer, as in this is the right way to do it. There is a debate going on. And
what's your personal view?
My personal view is that I think the concept of safety and trust, which is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has been espousing from 2021, and he said this in the context of DPIs, because in the internet and now even on AI, is something that all platforms must conform to. That regardless of what spiffy technology I have in my software, what all I can do, you should have some framework that essentially prevents that from being misused. In the whole argument of proliferation of
that means that translates into some sort of regulation?
I think guardrails, regulation, terms of condition, or even terms of use, which are much more legally enforceable contract between the user of a licensed piece of software and the licensee. So there are many ways of belling this cat, which is that you don't need to have government step in and constantly say, we will regulate that software and that software. It's impossible. I mean, the way innovation is going today, there will be 100 players. Even if you ban 10, there will be 150 new ones that will come up. So where will you regulate them? And these are all software as a service now, available on the cloud. The software will be available and deployed, let's say in Europe. There's no point you regulating in India when the software is available on the internet elsewhere. I think, but we can certainly insist that in the Indian context, these principles of safety, the principles of trust, and the fact that these have to be legally accountable, the platforms have to be legally accountable, those can certainly be enshrined in law and regulation. So we are going down that direction.
I see.
The larger conversation about how do you make every one of these enabling pieces of software also safe is a $6,000 billion question that somebody else will also have to sit down and answer, because it requires global understanding and global agreement.
We leave the big questions and the big solving of problems to you.
Exactly. Let's just solve the one problem that we have in front of us, which is misinformation and deepfakes.
I think a third pillar in all things social media or all things misinformation or deepfake is also consumer education. And that is where my last question on deepfake actually comes from, on how do we educate people on this? And I have a personal question here. I'm a new mom, right? I recently saw a video where they were saying that never put your child's picture on social media.
Correct.
When they grow up, there's so many ways in which it can be abused, etc. Where I'm getting with
you saw it on LinkedIn, yes.
Everywhere, on Instagram, on WhatsApp also now, and that's the last thread really, right? My question is really simple. If you were to give advice to people who are concerned, who acknowledge the problem but don't know what to do, what would your advice be? Should you keep away from social media? What do you tell your kids, for example?
Look, first of all, my kids don't listen to me, so I don't bother telling them anything. And this generation of Gen Zs will have to discover from their own mistakes what the perils of tech are. I mean, it's very difficult to evangelize or to advocate safety and trust to a generation of youngsters who are born into technology. So for them, reaching out to the iPhone or the iPad was even earlier than...
It's almost intuitive.
Intuitive, and it started very early in their lives. But this is certainly what I explain to people who are parents and who have some sort of an influence and say on children's conduct and behavior. First of all, I think you have to distinguish social media as being a public square versus a private space. And public square is where you are broadcasting to the rest of the world through selfies and everything about what you eat, who you're with, who your parents are, who your friends are, who your girlfriend is, who your boyfriend is. And some people, and most people, love that type of a feeling of the social media platforms. But that comes with its inherent risk. And those risks are only going to grow with AI and that type of technology. There are people who predate, there are people who scrape the internet. And the moment you are your information is out there in the public domain, you are essentially making your own life and your lifestyle more risky.
So you're saying that if you're putting yourself out there, be prepared for the outcome?
Yeah. And what I suggest is that social media was never meant to be a public square till Twitter came and invented that concept, which is that you are basically standing every day with a megaphone and broadcasting your life to whoever wants to hear it. That comes with inherent risks. Social media behavior ought to be what the original idea of Facebook was, that you are creating a space for your friends and your family and your circle, by implication those whom you trust, to connect to them, share information with them, and them to share information with you. The moment you go outside and dilute that concept of friends and family and start making it anybody who is interested in you putting a video about your food or your, whatever, then you are putting yourself at risk. And
so you're saying the concept of virtual family will come at a concept of a virtual cost.
Absolutely.
And you got to weigh the consequences.
Absolutely, because I cannot walk out into the road and say, you are my family, without having some sort of a dialogue and understanding that there is some basis for trust. But if you in social media just simply collapse that filter and say anybody who seeks a friend request, I'll just accept it, or vice versa, I'll go out and reach out, and then say no, but I got predated on, or I got my images got exploited, or my data got exploited, then in a sense you are asking for it. And so these are the kinds of things that platforms have to start disclosing to their users. And it's not enough, I keep telling them, it's not enough to have fancy advertisement in newspapers. It has to be in-app. People are living in that ecosystem. People come log in, and that is the ecosystem. It's like the metaverse that they live in. So any notification, any education, any cautionary tales that have to be told in-app.
If I can, it's a very dad-like advice. I'm not sure if Gen Z is going to really get it.
I certainly, as a dad, I tell my kids, look, it's your life. I will give you the advice that I have from my experience, and certainly my white beard and my years on this planet is enough evidence that I have some experience. Beyond that, you are an adult. If you want to still do what is risky and inherently dangerous, it's up to you to do it. I mean, people climb mountains, people jump off bungee jumping, people go up into the space. So different people have different propensities for risk, and maybe people love taking that risk. But then after taking that risk, do so in a knowledgeable manner. And if you're in a public square and you're displaying all the photographs and videos that you have, without at least making them private, and then you go into this problem of having becoming a victim of deepfakes, then while you can blame the platform, and you should blame the platform who hosts the deepfake, but you have your own personal behavior also a little bit to blame for it.
Sure. Got it. The Gen Z on my timeline are going to listen to this and say that you want to embrace tech, but why did you ban PUBG? Why did you ban TikTok?
So therefore, safety and trust has many attributes to it. And this goes back to what I talked about public square versus a private square. That having fun is one thing, but having fun with responsibility and not creating risk for yourself or for your community is also an important attribute. So any gaming company that uses servers that are not in India, that is taking data of personal data of a user and then exporting them to be used in some ways that are mysterious and not agreed to by law, will certainly not find... being good and innovative is not enough. You have to be good, innovative, fun, as well as compliant with the law. which is true for anything you do in life. I mean, you can have, if you're a Gen Z, you have a nice fast motorcycle and you get on the motorcycle and you go 140, 180 miles an hour drunk. That is against the law. It's a great motorcycle. You maybe you think you have fun, but you're putting a lot of people at risk.
Right.
So therefore, to the Gen Z, as much as I may sound like a father or a grandfather or whatever you want to characterize me. No. You know, whatever. No. My kids tell me that. So I say that, look, there is value in exploring whatever you want to explore.
Yeah.
But there is also a realization that you must have that there are dangers, risks. Right. If you are informed about those risks and dangers and you still want to do it, that's fine.
Yeah.
Then you're doing informed risk taking.
But what's your general thinking on gaming? It's a huge industry.
No, it is a huge industry. It's absolutely the next big innovation, at least in India, is going to come.
It's a profession for Gen Z. Let me just put it like that.
It is a profession. It is a passion. There's a huge amount of innovation that is going to come out of it. The Indian culture in itself lends itself to so much gamification. The storytelling that we do, whether you call of Duty or whatever Activision has come up with these big titles, we can create some of the biggest titles out of Indian storytelling. Yes, and so
fascinating. Give me an example.
No, so many things. I mean, there is history. There is so much of war. There is so much of great fairy tales. There are great stories that are there in the Indian mythology.
So do you imagine Mahabharat being gamified?
Of course, I had somebody who's a very, very popular South Indian star, Mohanlal, who is doing this very powerful gaming platform that is essentially rooted in Indian mythology. So there is a lot of action and a lot of exciting possibilities of gamification, because it connects the Gen Z and the younger generation to stories that otherwise they would never have access to. Otherwise, the only story they will hear is Call of Duty or FIFA 2023, which is fine. They are good games to play, but there is so much of opportunity for Indian games.
Do you play?
Yes, I do. I do occasionally. I'm not very good at it. I play NBA and FIFA with my kids, and they, of course, run circles around me. So, I do it mainly to keep them amused about how old people can't do well on games. So.
Okay, I must say, as a very young minister in the cabinet, bringing the average age down, this conversation of daddy and grandfather is not going to sit down very well. But I just want to move forward right now and talk about so much of what you do, right? Like I said in the beginning, is got to do with young people. I'm really curious to understand, how do ministers like you sort of catch on to the pulse of young people? And I say this also from a political lens. It's a serious question, right? It's not a frivolous one. There is a huge cohort of young people in the country who's going to vote in 2024. Yeah. They think differently. Absolutely. These 5 years to 10 years have been a massive leap.
Absolutely.
Right? How to reach them, how to cut through to them, how to make them understand stuff. It must be a great learning, but how do you catch on to that pulse?
I go meet them, and I have in the last 2.5 years that I've been honored to be a minister, I have visited over 72 universities and colleges. And these are all the small colleges and universities, not the fancy IITs alone. And I have met with students and I meet with them and I talk to them. And I can tell you one thing, and I'm not being facetious or anything, that really these meetings for me inspire me more than any other engagement that I have. And truly, because the confidence and the knowledge and the abilities. I was recently in my alma mater, Manipal Institute of Technology in Manipal, and I had a whole group of girls demonstrate a AI-powered drone. So, even the conventional stereotypes that people have in their minds, the women engineers are excelling, they are cutting edge. I was in a university in Gujarat during just before the Gujarat elections, and there was a whole debate starting about Revdi culture. And one student stood up and said, "What is your view on Revdi culture?" A young girl. And I said, "Look, you will have to take your decision, but I think of it as borrowing from your future and spending today," or something to that effect. And I said, but it's up to you all to decide, because I didn't want to prejudice their political thinking. And so she said, sir, politicians think that we youngsters don't know what is good for us, but we know that Revdi and freebie is not good for us. So, what can I say? So these encounters with me teach me that they can teach us every day, every minute more about tech than any one of us can even attempt to teach them. And I keep telling my colleagues in government this whole idea of mentoring youngsters. There's nothing that we can offer them. I mean, they will tell you the future of tech in stark, clear terms, in ways that you have not imagined yet. I think my approach is to engage, meet, listen, and learn from them as much. And in my own way, whatever I have in terms of offering them, in terms of advice and from my years of experience, I offer them. But it is certainly in all my years, engaging with Indian youngsters of this day, of this time, is one of the greatest privileges you can have.
So this brings me towards the end of what you're saying, and I'm glad you brought elections, because that was one thing I wanted to touch upon, right? Elections are coming up. You've been traveling aggressively as well. I see you do a lot of meetups, like in small groups, even in Telangana, state, which in historically not very sort of pro-BJP in that way. How are you seeing these elections play out? Has too much been put into this being a reflection of 2024, or would you say this is a separate issue?
No, it's certainly not the same. The elections in Telangana, state elections, assembly elections, the dynamics are absolutely totally different. A national election, everybody realizes what the goals and what are the what they are voting for. It's for a strong nation, economic development opportunities, and to become, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji says, to become the third largest economy in the world. So 24, the discourse around 24, the questions that people will ask and want answered are already out there in front of us.
You're saying there is a disconnect. Let's not club the two.
No, they are absolutely not related at all. I mean, and the conversation that I have when I go to Telangana or Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh, all three states are where I campaign, they are about local representatives and local prices and local infrastructure and so on and so forth. And the reason I do, and party encourages me and supports me in doing these smaller groupings, is that you then are not, there's no, it's a conversation. Why, for example, I was in a program day before yesterday in Telangana, and a young lady in a resident welfare association stood up and said, but I have just worked so hard for the last 6 years to develop a relationship with my BRS MLA after so many years, and now you're telling me to vote for a BJP MLA.
Valid question.
Yeah, legit question. So she said, no, I have his number, he at least picks up my call. I know he's a crook. I know he's sold out.
But mera kaam karta hai.
No, I can at least reach him. I know the guy. So that's her point. So now this new person, Srinivas Reddy Garu, who is the BJP candidate, I don't know him. So fortunately with me, the wife of the candidate was there. So I said, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself? And the lady stood up and said, look, we are available, and in terms of accessibility, we are even more accessible and more responsive. And you get the double benefit that we are a BJP and we are, in a sense, designed for public service. This is our mission. So she said, fine, perfect. And that's, those kind of conversations, those kind of real doubts in people's mind. Yes, we admire the BJP, we admire Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, but I don't know who's my person in Rajendra Nagar constituency of Hyderabad city of Telangana state. So those things lend themselves to a smaller, tighter conversation about their problems, about their role.
So it's a slow progress. You clearly realize you'll be able to not perhaps reach a lot of people suddenly. BJP will have to carve its inroads gradually. It can't be done now or overnight.
See, Prime Minister Modi ji always says one thing. It is one thing for us, of course, to be elected and given an opportunity to serve. But where we are not able to do that because we are late into that, we have not built the organization or the visibility is there. Even if we can alter the discourse of politics and governance in that state or that constituency, we are happy. If the dynamics in the past was there would be one BRS guy who's serving only one family, and then the other alternative is only Congress. Having the BJP candidate there talking about service, talking about governance, talking about disclosures of interest, talking about corruption-free governance and public spending, at least enlightens the voters that there is such a thing as beyond these two options that they have seen for the last 65 years in Telangana.
Can I say something slightly that
Yeah,
just struck me right now? Your approach right now of trying to go into spaces which are, or states which are largely bipolar and BJP related, has a striking similarity to what Arvind Kejriwal's philosophy is also in politics.
Yeah, excepting the difference, see, the difference here is that we do what we speak. We walk the talk. Talking in politics is the easiest thing to do. Being an outsider, pretending to be an outsider and then becoming the biggest insider is what Arvind Kejriwal ended up with. And I can tell you one thing, during those days, I was an independent MP and I was in awe of him.
Oh,
as
really?
being this, I was in awe of him being of this force for good, etc., etc. But, he has disappointed. His trajectory of disappointment or his velocity of disappointment is the fastest in the history of Indian politics. So he's obviously.
You think he's a done phenomenon?
No, I don't think he's a done phenomenon. I'm not an astrologer, and I certainly don't want to call the sunset on anybody's career. But he's certainly a highly discredited phenomenon. Because he has done something that is even worse than the Congress. Congress makes no bones about the fact that they lie for a living in politics. They lie, they loot, they are corrupt, and they make no bones. They don't make any attempt to hide it. They occasionally go for a walk and call it Jodo Yatra or whatever, but they don't make any great attempts to pretend that they are something that they are not. Arvind Kejriwal's real, in my opinion, betrayal to the people who supported him is that he pretended for a long time to be something that was fresh and new in politics, fully knowing that he was not going to be fresh, knew nothing, he was going to be another Congress party. And I called him out during the Gujarat election saying, there's no difference between these two parties. The only difference is that he is not the son of somebody who was already a prime minister. So he has certainly, he has to live with that on his conscience, that he led people up the garden path with a song and dance and a dog and pony show, and then he has led them down, and he has led them down badly.
Since I have you, I have to ask you about what's happening in the startup ecosystem at the moment. And I want to look at the big picture broadly, right? What we saw as Startup India, great enthusiasm, etc., had its own wave of learning, so to say. The pandemic came, and that was one big milestone. They shot up. We saw huge funding since cash was available easily. A lot of them bloomed. Suddenly, we were now, post the pandemic, in a phase where they are struggling, a lot of them. There's a lot of course correction. A lot of them are out in the market for sale as well. A lot of IPOs hitting as well, yes. But there is a course correction. How would you define this particular phase in the startup ecosystem? What's your sense of what's also coming next?
I think people must understand what this digital economy is. The startup and innovation economy is part of an overall digital economy. We were in 2014 about 4.5% of GDP, the digital economy, and that was mainly ITES. We are at about 11% today, and we will be 20% of GDP by 2026. Now, what is happening? There are 3 or 4 or 5 independent trends that are happening. One is the ITES continues to grow. The consumer internet phenomenon, which is what you refer to as startup, which is all the D2C brands, whether they are Byju's or Flipkart or all of them took off. And in the COVID era, when digitization really was accelerated, investment came in. And the whole story was about consumer scale, D2C scale. But there are 3 or 4 other new trends that have started, curves, that are adding to and diversifying and broadening the startup ecosystem. Semiconductors, electronics, Web3, which you think of as crypto, gaming, AI, and deep tech startups, which is electronics, AI, are today getting capital. You saw recently Reshare AI, there's a generative AI company that just got acquired by Adobe. So there are all of these other silent pools of capital, silent, very powerful innovators that are building real IP, real deep tech. understand, I take this, I explain it this way. IT and ITS made us the back office of the world. And we created a huge amount of jobs, great global companies like Infosys, Wipro. The D2C phenomenon, the consumer internet, created these global consumer brands, the Flipkarts, the Byju's, pre their so-called correction and so on and so forth. Now what is happening is you have a whole wave of companies that are creating core technology that will power the future of the internet. AI, semiconductors, electronics, high performance computing, blockchain, so cybersecurity. So you will see a lot of them. These by their very nature will not be in hundreds and 200s. That is the consumer play. These will be in 10s, 20s, 30s, but they will be incredibly valuable and they will be incredibly important in how they shape the future of.
You're saying there's almost a new epicenter of where
there are new waves that are coming in, and I can very comfortably tell you that today, if you look at the digital and innovation economy of the world, where we were only one flag in one narrow slice, which is ITES, it moved to two flags, which is consumer internet, and now there isn't a piece or slice of the digital economy or innovation economy in the world that we are not present in.
Right. But see, if there's a young person out there who's still trying to do a little bit, you speak so much about brain drain as well, right? Who sort of lost his job or whatever, wants to get started with something here. What's your advice to people like that right now? This is a different environment, you'll acknowledge?
Yeah, 100% is a different environment. And I think if you have a broad kind of a qualification, what is important, and this again, I repeat what Prime Minister has been saying from 2016, that in the future landscape, workforce landscape or opportunity landscape, your skills are going to be more important than your degree. So if you've got AI coding skills or you have supercomputer core server design skills, electronic design skills, or semiconductor verification skills, or if you leave all this as deep tech and you go into the normal space, you have the ability to code. You have to have some skills that will make you really valuable. In the generative AI space, using the APIs that OpenAI is doing, I just met a young kid, 9th standard boy in Telangana yesterday, who has done a whole generative AI application that you speak into and say, I have a health problem, tell me how I can onboard into a government scheme on health. And it will basically give you the entire chapter and verse on PM Ayushman and every other scheme, including a local state scheme. So those are the kinds of skills you need. So to youngsters, I always say, because I meet kids, youngsters who are BTechs in engineering. They say, no, but we are not getting this opportunity, that opportunity. I said, look, that's because you've only done focus on the degree. If you also focus during your studies on getting some skills, whether it's coding, testing, whatever, then you just become that much more attractive, either for a company or for you to start something on your own.
You're also in a way saying that the kind of skills that will boom in the future are of a particular kind. The
Absolutely.
D2C typical, which was almost a model which anybody could replicate in the pandemic, that phase perhaps is over. You got to sort of focus on skills.
That phase is not over because that phase will still play out till we reach 1.3 billion Indians using the internet. There's a lot of headroom for growth there. But that growth will be very disciplined growth. It'll be growth with a focus on profitability, customer acquisition costs. It'll be running it like a real business rather than running like a valuation play. What this so-called winter in funding that you referred to or this correction has done is basically tell people that remind entrepreneurs that this is no longer about just making your pitches for Series D, Series E funding. This is about now saying you've got the money, make it a world-class franchise, make it profitable, have the metrics, run it like a real proper organization. So that challenge of growth and the opportunity to touch and serve 1.3 billion Indians over the next 5 years, that is still a huge area. And I still think that we will attract $100 billion of investment in the next 2 years only in that space. But I'm saying in addition, there are all of these new areas that are emerging that can attract between 20 to 40 billion dollars of investment in the next 2 to 3 years. AI, quantum, supercomputing.
We're running out of time, but I'll get back down to the questions which fascinate everybody really the most. And since the center of this conversation has been about young people, I would love to know what fitness regime is it that young ministers like you sort of follow?
You certainly can't accuse me of being fit, because I have a ongoing challenge and an ongoing problem, because I travel so much that I eat on the road, and it's certainly something. Now, look, if you want me to ask me, one of my regrets is that I'm not fitter than I am. I used to be very fit, but the last 5-6 years, I have not focused on that as much. And
is it possible for politicians to be fit?
Yeah, it is possible. I think it is possible, but it's a question of making it a priority, and I certainly haven't done that enough. But to the youngsters, I'll say, look, health is certainly one of the biggest assets. If you look at your own balance sheet, there is skills, there is wealth, and there is health. So I say skills, health, and wealth are the three aspects of your personal balance sheet that you should focus on. I seem to have done okay on the skills and the little bit of money that I've made as an entrepreneur, but the health part of it is something that I've ignored. I would certainly urge people not to do that.
Is biryani, all those pictures with biryanis that we see of you in Telangana,
that is one of the reasons. That is one of the reasons that I haven't been as disciplined about health as I should be. Yes.
Okay, all right, sir. Thank you so much for taking out the time. It's been lovely.
Thank you for the conversation.